are bright and shiny in my mind. You got me loving, hating, crazy indecision in my mind.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast, where the focus is on deer hunting, tips, tricks, tactics, and stories from across the Midwest. And now, here is your host, Aaron Blicey.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Blicey, and this is episode number 35. Today, I don't have my co-host, Justin, with me. He is actually in Iowa, but they are getting hammered with a big snowstorm tonight, and he's got some other things he has to deal with. So I'm flying solo tonight, and I do have a really cool guest on. His name is Jared Shaffer. He's from West Virginia, and he comes on to talk about his season this last year, and he had a good one. He first started off in Wyoming and killed a great mule deer, comes back to West Virginia, gets on a couple bucks on public land, moves to Ohio and kills a great buck, and then goes back to West Virginia to kill another really good buck. So this is a really cool podcast. We also get into saddle hunting and run and gun setup. So I'm really excited to bring this one to you guys. Hopefully you enjoy it. So without further ado, here is Jared. All right, we are hot, and today I have Jared Shaffer on the phone with me. Jared, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. It's cold here in Michigan. There's no snow yet, which is okay. I like that. That means I can drive through all the farm fields right now to get back to the woods and do everything I need to do, and everything's frozen. So that's a-okay with me for sure.
Yeah, for sure. We're actually getting some snow here now. It's been a pretty mild winter, but yeah, we got a couple inches today, and actually got to take my boy out hunting a little bit, so it was a pretty good time.
Well, cool, man. Before we get too far, I do want to, for everybody who doesn't know you, kind of give us a background, who you are, where you're from, and what you do for a living.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Jared Shaffer. I'm from North Central West Virginia. I'm 31 years old. I got two awesome kids. Married to a really good girl that likes to hunt and fish and do all that stuff. And I'm a electrical technician by trade. I grew up in North Central West Virginia, lived here all my life, hunted here mainly all my life, but here in the past couple of years, I've got to branch out and do some other things. But yeah, just a West Virginia boy that likes to hunt. That's pretty much it.
Well, sweet, man. So, today I wanted to bring you on because you got a lot. You've got your hand in a lot of things, from what I can see, from social media and YouTube and everything. You're a photographer, you're a videographer, you are a hardcore hunter, and you just get it done year after year. And by the looks of your social media, you might have had the best year of your life this year. I don't know if that's true, but I'll let you answer that for yourself.
Honestly, the last 2 years have been pretty awesome. I didn't think I could top last year, but I may have done it this year. Yeah, I mean, I've been really fortunate the last couple of years to kill some really nice bucks and have some good hunts. So, yeah, I guess I've done pretty good the last year or so.
So growing up in West Virginia, can you explain how that hunting is, like how you were brought up doing it and how it is now?
Yeah, sure. So I got started hunting, at a really young age. My dad, take me out, squirrel hunting, small game hunting, stuff like that. And, when I was coming up, our hunting season really revolved around the week of rifle season, which was in the week of Thanksgiving. So the whole year kind of revolved around that. Everything else was just kind of extra. My dad did get into bow hunting pretty good when I was little. And, I always remembered, waiting for him to come home after dark to see what he would, see if he had any luck or anything like that. But, yeah, I could always remember just waiting for my dad to come home and see what he got. But, yeah, mainly when I was young, it revolved around that week of rifle season. And that's kind of how it is here in West Virginia. The rifle season is a big tradition thing. And that's when you see most of the hunting pressure. Bow season is when, you don't see as many guys in the woods. So that's kind of why I like bow hunting. But yeah, it's a kind of a big tradition thing around here with the rifle season, I would say.
Yeah, and that sounds a lot like the area where I'm at here in Michigan, and rifle season's a huge tradition, and deer camp's a huge tradition, and we do have a lot of
Yep.
bow hunters as well, but there's not as many obviously as rifle hunters, but bow hunting to me, that was one of my dad's biggest passions when he was, when I was coming up and young and everything, and that was something he instilled in me, and it's something I remember. I actually had my daughter shooting my first bow last night. She's only 16 months old, but
Nice.
we were in the basement here, and I was helping her and everything, and she, she's still really little, but she like kind of took to it, and she like wanted to keep doing it, and that, that's just, I got a picture. That's kind of how I probably was back when I was little, but
Yeah.
it's just one of those things, those traditions that you latch onto, and the rest is history basically. But
Yep, for sure.
I've been to West Virginia a couple times, and honestly, I've only been there for whitewater rafting on the New River Gorge and everything. But
Yep.
in that area, it's really hilly and everything. Now, explain to me kind of what your terrain is and what you hunt there in West Virginia.
Yeah, so most of West Virginia is pretty hilly. There's not really any flat areas in West Virginia. The area you were talking about, it gets more extreme down that way. I'm in the northern end, closer to Pennsylvania. So we've still got some pretty steep country up here. The hills aren't as high, but definitely some bluffs, really steep ridges, rocky, kind of open hardwood type terrain, mountain laurel. It's just a really pretty place to hunt, but it can definitely be pretty physically demanding, I guess I could say.
Do you start every year in West Virginia? Because I know you travel around Ohio, and you've been going out to out west and everything, and hunting mule deer and stuff like that. So do you typically start right there in West Virginia and then kind of branch out from there?
Yeah, our season started opening up a little earlier a few years ago, and I always try to locate a buck here close to the house, and I'll kind of start here in West Virginia, and I can hunt after work and stuff like that. So I always start my season out here, and then I'll kind of move on as I get closer to the rut.
Okay. And are you typically 100% public land, or do you do a little mix of public and private, or how's that playing out for you?
Yeah, I do a little bit of mix of both. I got some pretty good private ground to hunt, but I also do a lot of scouting on public land, just trying to find areas that I could bounce around to. And yeah, the last couple of years I've kind of gotten into the public land thing and just really been having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, and that's something that, growing up here, I've never had to go get public land or have to go hunt public land, because I've been fortunate enough and blessed enough to, ever since, I started hunting, I've been hunting private that my family has owned. And so I've been kind of spoiled in that way. I've never really had to go branch out. And honestly, growing up, public land was never even like a thought. Not public land was never really even talked
Yeah.
about, honestly. And not a lot of guys around me were doing it that I knew. So it was not something I just never even looked into, really. It's something that it's been a thought, and I've been wanting to do it, but I put so much time and effort into my private lands, and trying to keep them upkept with with trail cams and scouting and food plots and hinge cutting and land management, stuff like that. I really just don't even have time to even manage
Right.
those to the tip top shape that I want them. So I don't even
Right.
the public land kind of gets put on the back burner.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. It's kind of funny because I was, when I was raised, my grandfather and my dad would always talk about when they used to hunt public land and how bad it was and how many bad experiences they had and just people being everywhere. And I always kind of took it as public land was like the last resort.
Yeah.
And that's really a big mistake on my part, because I've realized now what I've really been missing out on the past couple of years, because I've honestly had nothing but good experiences on public land. So kind of regretting that over the years for sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of the same way I took it too, is like public land was for those guys that didn't really have a place to go, so they went to public land. It wasn't a lot of guys that had private
Right.
land farms as well, and they were just, decided to go hunt public. So, but it is on the radar for sure. So, but I do want to get into this year. So maybe let's start at the beginning. the beginning of this year, coming in through the summer, and what your plan of attack was for all these hunts. So just to recap, like you killed a buck in West Virginia, right?
I in Wyoming and killed a buck there, and then I come back to West Virginia, and then moved to Ohio, and then back to West Virginia. So
Okay. So,
I think that's the right order.
okay. So let's start there. I mean, you went out west, so let's start with that trip. What was your plan of attack going out there and getting that buck on the ground?
Yeah, so this trip was kind of a long time coming. We had been putting in for points for that area for 8 years. So we finally put in for the tag, and I'd kind of already been, getting myself physically ready, training and stuff last year. But when I finally saw that I drew the tag, I really ramped up my training this past summer. And honestly, most of my focus was on that. I did run trail cameras in West Virginia and Ohio, and honestly, I didn't really have any bucks that really excited me. So I just put all my focus into getting ready for this Wyoming trip. And we went out there September 12th. We got out there, had a couple days to, get familiar with the area and get settled in. And we actually found a couple bucks the very first day in there. And the first day of season, we actually two of us. There's three of us that went, but me and my buddy, we both tagged out the very first day on that trip.
Oh, wow. Were you with a gun or a bow?
It was with a rifle. Yeah,
Okay.
it was early season rifle. Yep.
So you guys tagged out the first day. What was that hunt like? Were you guys up in the mountains? Where is it more flatlands? What was your plan of attack to get on these mule deer?
Yeah, we were up in the high country. We backpacked in. It was just an area that I had found on just cyber scouting, Google Earth, OnX Maps. It was just a spot that I found that I thought would hold some deer, and I just kind of marked areas that I wanted to check out. And yeah, we hiked up in there about 4.5 miles. Um, the hills in West Virginia can be pretty bad, but you haven't seen nothing until you go out west and get to experience those mountains. I mean,
Yeah.
it was absolutely amazing. It was really intimidating, to be honest, when we first got out there. Thinking, can we actually do this?
Right.
And we just took it slow. Just started hiking up into the area that I had marked on the map, and we made it up in there, and we hiked out to a glassing spot that I'd marked on the map. And this is no joke. Within 5 minutes, I spotted a 175-inch buck.
Holy cow. And this is on public land.
Yeah, public land. Just do
Wow.
it yourself. I've never seen a mule deer in my life, and the first one I saw was a 175-inch buck.
Holy cow. So did the other two guys that you're with, have they ever mule deer hunted at all?
No, this was all our first time.
So what was your big plan? Like, what was your thought in your head? Like, this is what we're going to start with and then kind of go this way? Or did you have a plan A and a plan B? Like, where were you at with that?
Yeah, we had several spots marked that we wanted to just get to in glass. And then if we didn't see anything, we were going to move on. But yeah, we made it to the first spot. We glassed up that big buck. He had two other bucks with him that were smaller. They weren't shooters. So, we kind of had that deer located. So we decided to go to another spot that we had marked that was actually really close to camp. And we hadn't been there 5 minutes, and we spotted another big buck just 1,000 yards below our tent. So, knowing that we had two good bucks located, we decided to draw sticks to see who got to go after the biggest buck. So we did that opening morning, and my buddy Josh, he drew the stick to go after the big buck, which I was totally fine with. And him and his brother, they took off after that buck that morning, and I dropped down below camp just to glass that hillside. And I ended up on this. He was a 3x4 and another smaller 4x4. They were coming out of the timber, headed up into the cliffs to I guess bed for the day. And I watched him for a little bit, and man, this buck, he was just really cool looking. Has a double throat patch, velvet hanging off still, And I think that's kind of what tipped me over the edge that I decided to go after him. I had him at 470 yards, I think. And I just decided I was just going to see how close I could get, see if I could put a stock on him.
Yep.
So I just started moving down the canyon, trying to get the wind in my favor and all that. And I got to within 200 yards. I couldn't see him, so I just decided to keep on moving. So kept moving down the canyon. I got in the same patch of trees that they were in, and I actually caught a glimpse of them. And I decided just to creep my way along until I either got a shot or they jumped up.
Yep.
And I got within. It might have been less than 60 yards. It was really close, but I kicked him up out of his bed, and he took a couple jumps and stopped broadside, and instinct kicked over from there, and I dropped him.
That's awesome, man. How long of a stalk was it for you then?
I'd say probably an hour and a half. It wasn't too bad.
All going downhill, or did you kind of go downhill and then you have to kind of go back up to where was he on another valley?
Yeah, so I was kind of on the same level as him on the side of this, kind of like a rock. It's not like a cliff, but it was really steep. But they kind of, where they come out of the timber and were headed up, they were kind of on the same level as me. So I dropped down into the heavier timber just for some cover and kind of circled around them, and ended up kind of coming back up the hill. I kind of circled down. The wind was blowing straight down the canyon. The thermals were still falling. It was early morning. So I kind of stayed low and circled them so my wind was good, and ended up coming back up into them.
That's awesome. So I mean, that was pretty easy then. As you walk up to him and you're like,
honestly,
"What are you thinking?" That's got to be pretty easy.
Yeah, I was thinking, did I screw up, shooting this buck on the first day? But it actually ended up paying off, and I can get into that because we had the Garmin inReaches, so I messaged the guys, and they came down, and they had actually got within 300 yards of that other buck, the big one, and just didn't get a shot at him. So Josh had went after that buck in the morning, so he decided he was going to help me pack my deer out because it was pretty warm that day. And his brother was going to go back to the same area and go after the bigger buck. So we packed my buck out. I had 80 pounds, I would say, on my back, and Josh had about 40 with the cape and everything. So that was pretty rough. I've packed out a couple whitetail, but nothing like that. I mean, I had trained for it, but when you're coming down straight up and down rock ledges and stuff like that, it's pretty physically demanding.
It's a different ball game for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved every step of it, though. Man, I loved it. It was awesome.
Yeah.
We got him packed out back to the truck, and we had to drive an hour and a half back to the processor, and got him all dropped off. And as we were driving back to the trailhead, I got a message on my inReach that Jeremy had shot that other buck.
Oh, wow. The big one?
Yeah, he had shot the big one. And so we hiked 4.5 miles to camp, and then we had to hike 2 more miles past that to where he was at.
Wow.
And yeah, by the time we got his buck packed out back to camp, it was like 1 a.m., I think.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so super long day.
Yeah, that does make for a long day, but a successful day.
Yeah, I mean, just never would have dreamed that we would have killed 2 bucks the first day.
Right.
But, yeah, the day, so he shot that one Saturday. I helped him pack it out Sunday morning. And as we were driving back to the trailhead, we could see this big plume of smoke coming over the mountain. And I thought that it looked pretty close, And
Yep.
I started messaging my wife and trying to get her to contact the Forest Service and figure out where the forest fire was. And she couldn't get a hold of anybody. And so we started hiking back up to try to find Josh. And he had actually come running off the mountain. He was almost back to the trailhead. He had left all of our gear. Everything was still up on top of the mountain.
Holy cow.
And yeah, ash was raining down on him, just completely covered in smoke. So Yeah, it was pretty scary, honestly, because we didn't know what to do. We had, several $1,000s worth of gear sitting on top of the mountain,
Yeah, no kidding.
and we just kind of slowly worked our way up, just keeping an eye on the smoke and everything. And we decided we were just going to go for it and try to get all of our gear and get out of there. And we ended up making it, and we packed that night. And yeah, we had to get a hotel room, try to come up with plan B after that.
Wow. So, I mean, how close was the fire to you guys? Do you know?
It was 2 ridges over, so probably 3 miles from us,
Close
I
enough.
would say. Yeah, definitely. And it was so dry that we were just worried that, falling embers could just set off another one just at any point. So
Right, yeah. Wow, that's crazy.
it was definitely, yeah, the first couple days were a pretty big adventure, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, you're in Wyoming, right? That's where you were at?
Yeah, that was Wyoming. Yep.
Yep, so Wyoming was a success for you. So then you decide to come back to West Virginia, and were you going to start the bow season off there then?
Yeah, that was my plan, was to come back to West Virginia and, just start my process all over. I didn't have any good bucks on camera, like nothing. It was looking pretty grim, really. So I just decided to start hopping around to these bedding areas that I'd scouted out, and just, hopes that I could find a good buck. And I actually did an observation sit over a bedding area that I killed a buck in the year prior, and actually spotted a really nice buck. Probably, he's a 4.5-year-old. He was a 10 last year. He was a 9 this year. And I almost got a shot at him that night. He was just out of range, and I watched what he did. And I went back in there the next day, and I had him at 16 yards and didn't get a shot at him. There was just
Really?
some limbs and stuff in my way. Yeah, so I almost put it together early on a really good buck. And after that, it was just the same deal. I kept having run-ins with good deer. I had a really nice buck, 24 yards on public land. Just didn't get a shot. And that was kind of the story of my early season. It was just, I was getting on pretty good deer, but I wasn't able to, get any shots off.
So that first buck that you had a couple encounters with, was that on public land then?
No, it was actually private land.
Okay, private. So how big of a private chunk are you hunting? How big is it?
250 acres, I would say.
Okay. And do you have a couple guys that hunt it with you, or are you the only one that hunts it?
There are a few guys that hunt it. Mostly rifle hunters. There's a couple guys that bow hunt it, but nothing too bad. Yeah, I've pretty much got the place to myself.
That's awesome. That makes it nice. So going in, you said you were going after these bedding areas that you had killed a buck in last year. So
Yep.
what kind of plan were you trying to make? Like when you're going to these bedding areas, do you have wind specific bedding areas? So like, with a west wind, do you only hunt this bed and this bed, or are you just kind of getting on, any side of the beds, that's a good one for you, and just trying to hunt, seeing if anything's coming in and out?
Right. Yeah, these are mainly wind-specific spots, wind-specific beds that I've just basically found over the last couple of years, scouting and, through my observation, in season. But yeah, I've got, I don't know how many spots, quite a few spots that I've scouted out that on certain winds just seems to hold a couple bucks. And a couple of them are specific beds, but lots of them are like a bedding area, kind of a small area that will hold a couple bucks. That's kind of what I'm targeting.
Yep. And you're hunting exclusively out of a saddle, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep,
so
tree saddle. Yep.
yeah, and that's something I want to get into here eventually as well. But that makes it nice because a couple years ago I hunted out of a saddle. It'd have been 8 or 9 years ago. I hunted out of a saddle for a couple years, and I've actually had Greg Godfrey from Tethered on, and he's actually going to come on next week again to talk about some more saddle stuff. But
nice.
I was hunting out of a trophy line tree saddle. I don't know if you're familiar with the trophy lines at all, but it was one of those things. It just wasn't comfortable for me, and I kind of struggled out of it. And in a lot of ways, but it was nice. I see the benefits in it, and I really want to get back into doing it.
Right.
But a lot of, and we can get into it another time. But a lot of kind of what I'm hunting is I have to have kind of, I feel like I have to have set stance because I'm getting really aggressive. But now, setting, prepping trees, specific trees, it's no different than just putting a stand up or just prepping it for a saddle. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm really
Yeah,
excited about
exactly.
getting one of those and getting back into it because there's so many benefits to it.
Yeah, I'm definitely a huge fan of the saddle. It's been a game changer for me, over the last several years. There's no doubt about that. It's just makes it a little bit easier to me, it's the terrain we have around here. It's just, you know, I like to self film, so carrying a stand with all that gear is
It's tough.
it's awful. So
Yeah. Yep.
the saddle makes it easy.
Yep. So to kind of get back to the beds, so I have a question, and this is something I'm learning, buck beds and how they bed, within the last like year or two. So my biggest thing is, have you had an experience where you see bucks? You were talking about a specific bed. So do you have, will there be 6 bucks that use this bed, or is if there's a dominant buck in the area, will he be the only one using that bed? Have you had that instance at all?
Yeah, actually, in 2016, I killed a big dominant buck that was using a specific bed, and there was actually quite a few other bucks that would bed really close to him. Like they would bed, I'd say within 40, 50 yards of him, just kind of circle around him almost. But yeah, I've definitely seen these big, the more mature bucks will take that best bed in that area, and the other bucks will kind of fill in the gaps around him. I've definitely seen that.
Yep. And what you mean by best bed, you mean like the best for like the one on the property that like is bulletproof. He can see the danger and he can smell the danger very well, and he's got exits, correct? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just the best bed in that specific area. He'll kind of take over that area. At least that's what I've seen anyway.
So the beds, you know, do you have a couple different areas on this 200 and what would you say it was 250 acres? Is that what it was?
Yeah, around 250 acres. Yep.
So on the 250 acres, do you have, a couple different beds that you like, bedding areas that you like to go in and hunt around?
Yeah, definitely. There's trying to think here off the top of my head. I'd say there's 6 or 7 different spots that I can hunt that are really good bedding areas. Most of them set up for some sort of northwest wind, southwest wind. A couple of them are actually at northeast wind. But our predominant wind here is southwest, so I'll get a lot of beds on the north-facing slopes, northeast,
Okay.
and that seems to be the most consistent around here in
Yeah.
the early season, anyway.
So with your bedding areas, like you said, you didn't have any bucks coming to the caliber that, you really want to take. So you were just going to start jumping around to these bedding areas. So now year in and year out, are some of these bedding areas, are you almost guaranteed to see a buck that you want to go after, or is it pretty hit and miss?
Between all of these spots, there is usually a buck in at least one of them. I don't put a whole lot of stock in what the trail camera is showing me because I can have that camera out there for 2 months and not get a picture of a buck that's using that area. Um, the first buck that I told you about, that big 9 point, this was a perfect example that trail cameras just don't show you everything. Because I had a cell camera, and this camera was only 15 yards from this bed on a pretty heavy exit trail, and I never got a picture of this buck. And I went in there on that observation set, and he got up out of that exact bed. I watched him stand up out of it, and then I went in. I don't know if it was the day after or maybe 2 days after, but he came out of that same exact bed, and I never got a single picture of him. So
It's crazy how those big mature deer, some of them they just have a sixth sense and how to elude cameras.
yeah, it really is. And I think that's a mistake a lot of people make is, they'll go solely off what that camera shows. And man, that has burned me. I don't know how many times because there could be a good buck in there and you're just not getting a picture of him.
Right. Yeah, and here in Michigan, I've got a piece of property that I'm trying to hold more deer on, and I'm doing some land management, some hinge cutting, and I've got an older camera it's not a great camera, but I let that thing run all year in there, and I never move it from that tree. And now I'm not dealing with a lot of mature deer, 4.5,
Right.
5 year old deer, but there are quite a few 3.5 year old deer that I'm trying to target that come through here, and they will come up to this camera, they'll lick it, they'll smell it, they'll walk around it. They do not care about that camera, but I do have some cameras that if you just pop them up there, they get a little leery about it, and you might get a picture of them, but it's like they don't like it. They have to get really used to it, and
Yeah,
that's what
for
I try
sure.
to do with all my stuff, even my sticks, my ladder sticks. I try to get them out early. I don't even have to hang the stands. I just like to get the sticks out there so they can see it, walk by
Right.
it, and they
Yep.
don't care.
Yeah, that stuff definitely makes a difference. And I actually have started putting my cameras up about 10 feet and just pointing them down, and
Okay.
just so they don't see them. But then you're targeting a really small area, so it makes it even harder to get pictures of them. So,
Yeah.
you know,
I ran into that this year as well. I had that same exact scenario, and I'm like, well, it was on the inside edge of a bean field, and earlier on in the summer, I wanted to put it right on the tree where my stand is. So, when I go in there to hunt it, I was just gonna, as I climb up the tree, I was literally gonna grab it right off. But I realized that it does not pick up a lot, especially on a bean field
yeah,
when you want to get those deer that are way out there, or it doesn't. It really didn't tell me anything. It was a waste of time, to be honest with you. So you really have to
yeah,
be. I figured out that you really have to be, specific. It might be a specific trail that you're trying to get. In the scenario I was in, I kind of messed up and didn't get what I was looking for. So yeah. So okay. So you went in there and you were after this big buck, saw him a couple times, and then you actually got on another deer. What? Correct?
yeah. So I got on. I'd actually scouted out a spot on public land that was almost 2 miles from the truck. It was a pretty good hike and pretty high pressured place. It seemed like there was a good many guys hunting it, but back in where I went, there was no sign of anybody being in there, and it was the only spot that I could find that was holding a lot of really good buck sign. And I actually found some apple trees in there, which is really rare for this area. It's just not something I find that often. So
Yep.
I ended up hanging a camera in there, and I went back in there. I hunted that spot once in the early season. I didn't see anything that time. And then the second time I went in there is when I had the encounter with that buck. And he was a good 9 pointer, really heavy. I'd say he was probably a 3.5 year old, but I mean, that's a shooter to me up here.
Yep. Yeah.
But, I had that camera in there and I wanted to check it, but this spot is so thick that I could not find the camera after dark. So I had to leave the camera. And so I didn't know what was in there at all. I mean, I'd seen that buck. I knew he was there, but I actually went in there a third time and retrieved that camera, and there was quite a few good bucks using that spot. So definitely keep that spot in mind for this coming year.
Yep. So when you're going into this spot, have you been to this spot before in previous years, or is this a totally new spot of this public?
Yeah, this place is completely new to me. It's pretty close to where I work, so I just wanted to kind of use it as a secondary area or just another spot to try out right after work. But yeah, so I just went in there in March and just kind of walked the whole place. It's not that big of a place, so I was able to kind of cover most of it. But yeah, I just found one good area that seemed like it was holding all the deer, and it was pretty good ways back in there. So I just kind of went in there for 2 days and broke it down the best I could and planned my access routes and picked the tree and everything I was going to use, and then just left it alone until season.
Okay, so you actually did previously scout this in the summer then.
Yeah, actually
Okay.
in the I think around March time frame, so it was before everything greened up. But
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so that's one thing that I ask a lot of guys that hunt public is like, where do you even start? If
yeah,
do you go in there and scout in the off season, or if you can't, are you just kind of going in willy nilly, or that's kind of where to me, how you were saying Wyoming with the hills and everything's intimidating. To me, public land is almost intimidating in a way. It's like we've got a piece by us here that's like 8,000 acres, and it's like, holy cow, like
Wow.
where do you even
Yeah.
start, And I just need to go walk it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, when I'm tackling something like that, like I've got another place that I've been hunting this year that's 18,000 acres.
Holy cow.
It's huge. So I just pick small areas and kind of break it down, cyber scouting, trying to figure out the best spot to look at in that one little area. And then, I'll spend the day, break down that area, see if it's worth checking out. And then if it's not, I'll move on to the next. You can definitely, wear yourself thin trying to look at a place that big. You just kind of have to break off small chunks and take it one day at a time. That's kind of how I do it anyway.
Yep. And now, when you're kind of breaking that down, what kind of terrain features? I mean, you said you're in really hilly country. Like, are you looking for terrain features? Are you looking for some sort of food, or what's the first thing that you're looking for? Are you going right after buck beds? Like what is it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking for, benches and or points, anything that would, I might think a buck would bed, but I'm looking for like connecting features, like a skinny ridge that connects two or three other ridges that come into it. Another good thing to look for in the hill country around here is if you have a really steep ditch on the side of a ridge, it'll kind of funnel the deer toward the top side of it. And that's always a good thing for any kind of transition edge from hardwoods to like a clear cut or maybe pines, anything like that is usually a pretty good area to check out.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they're all great features and everything, and that's just the things that I'm trying to figure out, not even on public, just for, other features, even on my private farm, that, the saddles and the benches and, things that funnel
Right.
down and connecting factors and, a lot of it from hill country to flat in my eyes, you can find those, but they might not be. I mean, you can find the same features, but they might not be as apparent, so it might take a little bit
Yeah.
harder, a little deeper thought and to look into it.
Yeah, I would probably struggle a little more on flatter terrain. I think, having the defined terrain features in hill country makes it a little easier. But yeah, and I tend in more flatter terrain, like if you have a real big flat ridge around here, if you can find those transitions from really thick cover to more open hardwoods, it's usually a pretty good place to start and start breaking it down from there.
Yep. Okay. So back to, I got off on a tangent there, and I want to keep going on that, but I want to go back to this other buck on public. So you found this buck on public, and you found some apple trees back there, and you couldn't find your camera for a couple days. So so from there, take me from there. What happened next?
So that spot, I actually, once I was able to check that camera, it told me that once those apples were gone, those bucks were gone. Because there was a ton of rubs in there. There were starting to be some scrapes, but they had done all of that in like the first week of October. And after that, there was absolutely nothing in there.
Really?
So yeah, so I kind of abandoned that spot. I did hunt it one more time with a rifle, just a quick hunt after work, but I just moved on after that.
So then what was your game plan? Were you going to try to find those bucks again, see where they're relocated, or were you going to back out and just go for a new area?
Yeah, I didn't really have another spot to check out on that particular piece of public, so I just kind of abandoned it for the year. I'm going to revisit that this spring and try to break it down a little better and see where those deer go. But I definitely learned that it's a really good spot early season if those apples are in there. Those bucks were definitely in there a lot in daylight. So yeah, I just kind of moved on after that and started hunting other areas that I had scouted out.
And then did you find any success in, mid-October to later October gearing up for the rut?
So I didn't have any luck getting on another buck, and you know the in the private areas that I had. I did kill a doe with a bow, but yeah, I got up to the end of October and I couldn't put it together on a buck here. So yeah, I moved on to Ohio after that.
And then was it Ohio public, or do you have private land that you go after in Ohio?
I actually have a 63-acre lease over there.
Okay.
So it's a small little place, but it's got a lot of really good property surrounding it, so it sets up really nice.
And then going into there, is that where you were gonna, focus the rut on? You were gonna take the rut from there and just see if you can get on any bucks. Did you have any good bucks on camera there, or was it all kind of like starting from scratch?
Um, we had some bucks that I knew made it through the previous season. This is our second year on this place. Killed a really good buck over there last year, and I knew there was a couple that I was definitely going after. There's one buck that we call Flyer. He's I couldn't tell you how old he is. I mean, he's just a brute of a deer. He's for sure 6+ years old. I mean, he's just an old buck. But
Yeah.
We actually didn't have any pictures of him, and I was kind of wondering if something didn't happen to him. But we had a couple other good bucks that I was going to go after, and that buck actually showed up on camera. I think it might have been Halloween or right around Halloween. So going into the rut, I knew that he was there to chase, and I had several other good bucks. So yeah, I definitely had quite a few options over there.
So is your lease close enough to your house where you can drive down for a weekend, or is it more of like it's a longer drive where you can just go in, or you have to go in there and kind of spend a couple days? Like what's that scenario look like?
Yeah, it's only about a 2-hour drive. So we spend a lot of weekends over there just hunting, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or we've even driven over and just hunted it for the day. So it's close enough that it's pretty convenient.
Yeah, that's real nice. So what was the time frame you were going to be focusing on in Ohio? Like what days in November?
So right around Veterans Day is my absolute favorite time to be over there. So I kind of held off until then. I wanted to, I didn't want to put any pressure on it. Just kind of wanted to go in there and see what happened. And the very first day, the buck I was telling you about that we call Flyer, I set up in a stand just for that deer. And because the year prior, on November 11th or 12th, something like that, we had him come through this spot right after daylight, and we almost got a shot at him. I was filming for a buddy of mine, and we had him at 10 yards and didn't get a shot at him.
Wow.
So kind of knowing that, the areas that he likes to run, I set up in this spot for him. And it was just starting to crack daylight, and I could hear a deer coming up the ridge. Same exact way he came the year before. And it was him. He came right in behind me, 22 yards. I had him, I was at full draw, and it was too dark. I could not see through my peep to get a good shot at him.
Oh man.
Yeah, so he walked off. He got to the top of the ridge and skylined himself, and I got to watch him for a few minutes. And that day turned out to be probably one of the best rut hunting days I've had in years. Right after daylight, I had a big 10-pointer come in, and the doe walked right past me, and I thought he was going to follow her and give me a 20-yard shot, and he ended up running up the ridge and trying to circle her, so I didn't get a shot at him. And then I saw another really good 8-point, and he kind of took the same travel route as that other buck. So about 9:30 that morning, I actually got down and relocated to try to, put myself in a better spot. And that whole rest of that day, it was just chaos, just bucks running crazy. We had the same big 10-pointer. He was covering the whole property, just running a big circle. I had him underneath my tree. My dad had him underneath his tree. My buddy had him under his tree, and none of us could get shots at him. He was just running too fast. But that was a Thursday. I can't remember the date. Probably the 9th or something like that. Can't remember the exact date. But after that, it kind of shut down. Friday and Saturday, I saw a couple little bucks. Nothing big. My buddy actually ended up hitting a buck, and we weren't able to recover it. And then I kind of figured that the bucks were locked down with the first does that were coming into heat.
Yep.
And I kind of figured that's why the activity just shut off for a couple days. So it came to Monday. I think it was Veterans Day, and it was my last day to hunt. So I went to a spot that's literally 50 yards off a gravel road, and it just sets up perfect for these bucks to cruise this ridge. It's kind of a real narrow pinch point between the road and a real steep ditch that comes up the side of the ridge, and there's a strip of pines that kind of blocks the view of the road. So these bucks just kind of travel the edge of these pines. So I set up on that, and it was about 8:30, and I hear a deer coming, and I saw it was a pretty good buck, and I decided he was a shooter, and I got him to stop in my lane at 15 yards and put a good shot on him, and I watched him run and fall over, and I was excited and pumped up that I finally got a buck on the ground, and I hear another deer walking, and I turn around, and the buck that I was telling you about that we call Flyer was standing 15 yards away.
Oh.
He had no clue that I was there, completely broadside, and I just filled my only buck tag.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was a kind of a kick in the nuts, I guess. But
So did that buck survive then? Do you know?
as far as I know, I don't have any cameras running or anything. I haven't had any for a while, so I don't have any pictures of him. But I have a pretty good relationship with all the neighbors, and nobody's said anything about killing him. So I think he's still there.
Okay, well that's good. Maybe he'll be there for next year for you to chase.
Yeah, and I've got pretty good history built up with him now, so it'd be pretty cool to get him down.
For sure. So your Ohio season's over then. Now you're transitioning back to West Virginia, correct?
Yeah, so I still got a week of bow season or so. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, come back to West Virginia, and I hadn't really hunted that much. Didn't have any trail camera intel to go off of. So I just decided to throw the saddle on and just go check out a ridge that has been pretty good in the past. I've actually never killed a buck there, but there always seems to be it always seems to hold a good buck. So I decided just to kind of scout my way in and set up on some fresh sign if I found it. And I get out there, and there was fresh scrapes and rubs just everywhere. So, I got pretty excited about that. And I just kind of worked my way out the ridge. I kind of had in mind where they might be bedded based on the wind that day. And I kind of just worked my way as close to where I thought they were bedded as I thought I could get. And
how far do you think you were from
them? I was within 100 yards, I would say,
okay,
of where they were, where I thought one would be bedded. So there's kind of an intersection in a logging road, and the road kind of cuts over the hill where I thought the buck would be bedded at. So there was two big scrapes right in that intersection that had been freshened up within the last 2 days, I would say. So I kind of figured out what the wind was doing, and I set up just downwind of those scrapes. And I saw a little buck chasing some does out of that bedding area. And that was really it. It was a pretty quiet evening. And it was, I had maybe 10 minutes of light left. It was getting pretty close to dark. And, I was filming my hunt and everything. And I filmed a little interview that, it just didn't come together for me, just kind of whining about, not getting the buck. And, I shut the camera off and was getting ready to pack up, and I hear footsteps coming. And I'm like, oh, here comes a deer. And I see a rack coming through the brush. I'm like, oh, man, it's a pretty good buck, too. And he comes into this scrape 17 yards, has no clue I'm there. So I get to full draw. He turns broadside, and, I just smoked him right through the heart. He took 3 jumps and fell over dead 15 yards away.
Oh my gosh. Was that the last day of bow season for you then?
That was the last day before our rifle season. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. And then you said your rifle season usually comes in around Thanksgiving. Is that when it was?
Yeah, it comes in the Monday of Thanksgiving. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome that your rifle season does that because ours comes in the 15th of November every year.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
that's rough.
basically, when that comes in, if you're like a diehard bow hunter, you might as well just hang it up in my area and just get the gun out.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly how it is here. I mean, if you don't get a buck, before the rifles start cracking off, I mean, your chances of getting one are pretty much zero. I mean,
Yep.
it's not impossible, but it's really tough.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you went to Wyoming, started the year off, killed your first mule deer, great mule deer, come back,
Yep.
you kill one in Ohio, a good whitetail, and then you come back like a week later in West Virginia, and then you knock another one down on public land, right?
It was private land. Yeah, it
That
was
one was private land. So you killed two on public, the mule deer and the whitetail.
I killed. Let's see, the muley was on public, and my two whitetails were on private though.
Gotcha. Okay. So then you're coming into gun season, and you've got how many buck tags do you get in West Virginia? Do you only get one?
We get 3 in West Virginia.
Oh,
Yep.
you get three. Okay, so
Yep.
are you transitioning over to the rifle now?
Yeah.
And you're trying to kill one with a rifle?
Yeah, and if it wasn't for a tree limb, I'd have got that done too.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, actually, I don't take rifle season as seriously. It's kind of more of a social thing. I get to go
Yep.
with friends and stuff like that, and I just decided to go to the public land, and it's a spot that I use a kayak to access, and that's kind of been a goal the last couple of years to kill one using a kayak for access. And yeah, I went and hiked back into a spot that I just looked at on a map. I had never actually been there, and I was getting into some pretty good buck sign and just kind of still hunting my way along, and I spotted a deer headed my way, and it wasn't a big buck. I mean, he was a pretty decent buck, but he comes cruising up the ridge 50 yards from me, and I tried to squeeze a shot past a tree and ended up hitting it and just missed him by maybe a couple inches.
You didn't have those bullets that go around corners. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I must have bought the wrong ones. They definitely didn't work.
Oh man. So you almost got it done with a gun too. So can you guys not bow hunt or can you not use a bow during gun season then?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Yeah, I like to gun hunt. I'm not one of those guys that gets hung up on one weapon. If it's legal, I'm out there doing it. So
I'm the same way. I agree with you. Like it's more of a social thing for me. Go to deer camp, but I also like to crawl up in a box blind with a heater if it's cold. And that's how I like to rifle hunt. I mean, I won't say I won't. Like this year, I hunted on the ground a couple times. I was after a specific deer, and I had to get right in on him to, and I didn't have any stands or anything right there. So I ground sat it a couple times. I've sat out of a couple tree stands, so. But for the most part, I mean, if I've already tagged out, or not tagged out, but if I've already tagged one, and I'm kind of more of a social, like just go out there and enjoy it,
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun, and I like to, especially this year, just going out on public land and just looking at spots that I've never been to and just kind of exploring really. And I actually ended up going back to that spot, but to a different area that I wanted to check out, and I ended up killing a doe with a rifle and using the kayak. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's really cool. So, that kind of wrapped up your year, correct? I mean, with those 3 bucks and a couple does, is that what it was?
Yeah, killed a couple other does, one with a muzzleloader, one with a rifle, and 2 with a rifle. But yeah, pretty good year.
It's a hell of a year, I'm telling you. So now I kind of want to transition a little bit here and talk about hunting with the saddle. I kind of want to pick your brain about this, and how long have you been hunting exclusively out of a saddle?
So 2014 was the first year that I I started with a saddle, and I've been strictly saddle ever since then.
So before then, were you still a gun mobile guy, or were you, hanging set stands and in the summer or whenever it may be and hunting those stands?
Yeah, so I've always been kind of a mobile guy, but I've always just used a climbing stand. The areas that I hunt, big hardwoods, finding a tree with a climber is not usually too big of a deal. But, you just run into the issue of, just climbing these hills and stuff like that. And it's the climber that I had, it was one of those big API. I
Yep.
don't even remember it was awesome. It was comfortable, but man, it was a brute to hike around the hills.
Yep.
But that's just kind of how my dad got me started. We always just kind of hunted mobile with climbing stands. And yeah, once I started self filming and getting more serious with that and more gear with that, that climber just got to be unbearable to carry around.
Yeah, clunky, and you want to be quiet and climbing up the tree, and I've been there. I used to have a climber back in high school and use it a lot, and it's just you can't be quiet. I mean, you can be quiet with them, but it's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, once you use a saddle system and realize just how quiet you can really be, I mean, there's just no way I could go back to a tree stand, honestly. I mean, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, and that's when I got into the trophy line tree saddle, I live in the same hometown as Johnny Eberhart, so I've seen a lot of Johnny Eberhart stuff and read a lot of his stuff, and he was the first kind of guy around here anyway that I've even heard hunt out of saddle, and honestly, nobody else really does. A couple guys
Yeah,
here and there, but I actually bought mine from him. He was a trophy line. I don't know if he was a dealer or if he had a couple saddles, and I bought one for me and my wife, and we use them exclusively for, 2 years at least, 2.5 years, and
yeah,
my biggest thing is coming from a set stand, and I wasn't even a mobile guy. Like I would, if I needed to move to a different area and do like a hang and hunt or hang and bang, I would do that. But typically, I was, my dad, growing up, he would always get in an area, hang his stands, and that's where he'd hunt. That was the thing,
right.
and that's
Yeah,
how I learned. So this saddle thing, I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm gonna go mobile with it. Well, uh, my biggest thing is trying to get comfortable in it, and I always wanted to revert back to the stands, and that was
yeah,
my big thing. I'd go sit one time in the saddle and be like, "Damn, this is too much. I can't do it. Go back to my stand," And it's like, finally, the second year for 2 years, I was exclusively all saddle. I'm like, nope, I'm not hanging stands this year. I'm just disciplining myself to do it. I got in a lot of good scenarios. I killed some deer out of it, but I also struggled out of it as well. But
yeah,
I see the benefits in it. I mean, you can literally go anywhere.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me, I guess the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge to try it was, we ended up leasing a place in Ohio, and we kind of wanted to do preset stuff. And I was looking at having to buy, a ton of different lock-on stands. And I've just never been a huge fan of the cheap lock-on stands that you can get. And I really couldn't afford to buy a whole bunch of good ones. So I was, faced with buy a whole bunch of cheap lock-on stands that I don't really like, or just jump into the saddle, which I've been thinking about doing anyway. So
Hmm.
that's kind of what pushed me over the edge to go with the saddle.
Yep. Now, what climbing method do you use? Like, what do you use sticks? Do you use, you probably can't use screw-ons in state land, but what kind of climbing methods do you use?
So I've kind of evolved over the last few years. When I first started, I used the one stick method. I had a Muddy Pro. They're like a 20-inch stick. They're fairly short, but I had a 5-step webbing aider on it, and I would just set that, climb to the top of it, swing off to the side in the saddle, and then move it up the tree as I go. It's pretty slow. It's a little bit labor intensive, but started with that, and then see, I'm trying to think of what else I've done. I've literally used just about everything out there, but the last couple years, I got a set of climbing spikes, and when I'm on private land, that is absolutely the way to go.
Really?
The climbing spikes I have now, they weigh 2.6 pounds for the pair. So they're carbon fiber. They don't weigh hardly anything. Um, when I hunt private land, it is 100% those.
Yep.
But you can't use those on most public land. You can't use them. Some you can, but when I can't use them, I'll use 24-inch sticks that I
Okay.
made. So that's my main two at this point.
Yeah, and so this last year, uh, I was gonna get a saddle from Greg and Tethered, but
Hmm.
he was backed up and everything, and I said, "You take care of everybody else first." Like I was going on dropped and everything, and I wasn't gonna be back till October, so I wanted all my stuff like set, ready to go, and so we just haven't hooked up since then, and I need to get mine ordered and get it coming. But I was also Drew Walter from um, oh darn it.
Yeah,
uh,
the Wild Edge. Yep.
Wild Edge, yes, Wild Edge steps. I have a set of those, and man, those are sweet. Like those are the ticket. So either when I get into this, I'm either gonna use that or I bought. Actually, I didn't buy it. I got it for Christmas. A set of Millennium climbing sticks. So they came out with
Yeah.
like a rapid rail system. So I really want. I haven't even got them out of the box yet, but um,
Right.
I really want to get into those, and I think I'm gonna have to put some sort of silent tape on them, or a lot of those guys use the tape to quieten them up, and I really don't know how
Yeah.
much they weigh yet, but I'm anxious to get them out and try them and see if that's the way to go too.
Yeah, I forgot to mention the Wild Edge steps. I had a set of them that I don't know if you've seen they call it the Nader and the Swader.
Yep.
It's kind of I had a set of those and I used that a few times this year, and it's definitely a good option if you put a little bit of practice into it. So
Yep.
yeah, you'll definitely have to try that.
Now the Nader and the Swader. The Nader is for the knee, isn't that right?
Yep.
And then the Swader, was that for the foot? Is that the foot one?
Yeah, it's basically your longer aider. So you would hook it up first and then take a step up, and then the nader has the hook on it that's right above or right below your kneecap. So that would
Yep.
hook into the rung on the Wild Edge step. But yeah, it's a pretty cool system and it's super lightweight. You can get really high with four of those things. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
So basically, if you can explain to everybody that doesn't know what a nader and a swader is, give your best rendition of what that is.
All right, so the Wild Edge step is kind of a triangle shape that has a crossbar on the front of it. So the swader is basically just a loop of webbing that you step. I would put it on my left foot and you clip it onto the rung of the Wild Edge step with a carabiner. So the one I have is an adjustable aider, so I can put my foot in it and then kind of cinch it down and kind of jack my leg up about as high as I can step. So it's basically just a single webbing loop that hooks to the Wild Edge step, and it's basically your first step up.
It acts as another step, so you don't have to put
Yeah,
one actually there.
exactly. And it cinches around your foot, so it kind of moves up with you as you go. So you don't have to have multiple aiders as you
Yep.
go up. Yep. So you take your first step up with that, and then that puts your second leg, which would be my right leg, puts you can just step up, hook that hook into that's right below your knee. You hook it into the rung of the Wild Edge step, and then you can transfer your weight onto that. And as you step up, you unhook the other leg's aider and kind of just move it up with you. It sounds more complicated than it really is, but it's pretty easy to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually have the aider. I think I have a swader. I think he sent me that as well. I used them a couple times out in the yard this year practicing and everything, and I just didn't have enough time to get with them to feel comfortable. And but next year, like this, that's one of my things this off season is to get really comfortable with those. I was getting up in the
Yep.
tree. I could get up about 20 feet or so in about 12 to 15 minutes, which I thought was okay for the first time
Yeah.
using them. But I really I want to get it, a little quicker, but also quiet. So try to find that happy medium.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of a learning curve to the wild edge and all that, but just like anything, it just takes a little bit of practice
Yeah.
to get it down right.
Yep. So, going forward now, you said your season's still going on right now?
Actually, ours is this is the first year that we've had. It's called a heritage season, where you can hunt with a percussion cap or a flintlock muzzleloader, and
Okay.
then a recurve or a longbow. So we actually have that this weekend, and then our season is wrapped up.
Okay. So what do you have planned going into the off season here to get ready for next year, really?
Yeah, so I mean, I've got several areas that I've been looking at on a map, and just kind of getting those in order, trying to figure out when I can go and check them out. I like to do all my scouting, before green up in the spring, so I can kind of look at, this past fall's buck sign. So, I'll mark several areas and just take a day and go check them all out and try to find some new spots. And then, I've obviously got spots that that have been historically good that I've been finding over the past couple of years. So just kind of, if I've learned anything new about those spots, during the season, kind of take that into account and see if I need to make any adjustments. But basically for me, I'm just trying to find spots that I can jump around on and try to get that all done before turkey season. That's usually my goal.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's usually my goal too, but I roll into like June and July and it's like, oh, I really need to get this stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough finding time to get out there and do it, that's for sure.
Yeah, especially when you got little kids and you want to get
Yep.
family time in and you're just trying to find a way to carve out an hour, just to get out there
Yeah.
and do something. So
Yeah, and I've definitely taken the family along, and they're all cussing at me because I'm dragging them through briars and all kind of stuff. So you just kind of have to pick and choose when you can take them out. But
yeah, I had that today. Honestly, my wife and I went out we took our daughter and she's 16 months old. She can't walk in the woods, so somebody's got to hold on to her. But I had my two nephews with me too, and one's 6 and one's 3, I believe. And
yeah,
the one the older one. He's just not like an outdoorsy type of kid, and the other one,
yeah,
he'd run through a brick wall and he'd never even get hurt. You know what I mean? He's just like talking, yelling, and everything. And there's pickers all over, and they just don't want to touch them. And it's like I'm trying to, check the cameras, but I want to be quiet. I have this problem. I was telling my wife, I'm like, it's hard for me to bring, even in the off season, it's hard for me myself to go in the woods and not be quiet. Like I'm always walking on like eggshells. It seems like, and it's.
yeah.
We
Yep.
got kids yelling, and I'm like, oh gosh, all the deer are gone. I know they are. But we needed to get out of the house. I'll tell you, we need some fresh air. So
Yeah, this is a rough time of year. Season's kind of wrapping up, and it gets dark early, so it's just not a whole lot to do.
yep,
I would know we've been feeling that too, so it makes it tough.
yep. And like I said before, we started recording there. I've really took up bow tuning and working on your own bow and building your own bow. So that's my off season stuff right now. I've been doing all my own bow work, so I'm excited to dive headfirst into that and kind of fine tune, my wife's bow and my bow and backup bow and all that stuff. So
Yeah, this is a good time of year to kind of go over all your gear and whatever tweaks you need to make. Just while it's fresh in your mind, just go ahead and get it done. That way, it's one less thing to tackle before season comes in.
for sure, man. Well, cool. I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And we were over a little over an hour here and getting a little late, so I'll cut you loose here.
Yeah, Aaron, I appreciate it. It was fun talking some hunting with you.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely have you on again here. I want to dive into some more things as well, but I don't want to keep you too late. And we're over an hour here, so we'll save that for a rainy day later.
Yeah, man, just give me a shout and we'll do it again.
Cool, man. I appreciate it. And there you have it, another great episode. I can't thank Jared enough for coming on and doing this, taking the time. It's late at night to come on here and talk about his season and his tactics and everything to go with it. One thing I didn't mention with Jared is that you guys should go onto his YouTube channel. It's called Flingin' Arrows, and he's got some really cool videos up there. He does all self-filming. He edits his own stuff. He's a photographer as well. So go onto his YouTube channel, subscribe to that, and there's some really cool content on there. So go on there, subscribe, show him some love. Again, I just can't thank Jared enough for coming on. So thanks everybody for listening, and don't forget, go on and leave a 5-star rating, leave some feedback, and I really appreciate it. Thanks everybody.
I am natural.